Hey friends, in this video we're going to kind of follow up on my previous video on 7D Mark III and 90D, what we should be expecting, and I kind of want to just dive into what these two cameras will mean for Canon as a brand, and kind of speaking to both brand equity as well as, you know, a new, I don't want to say North Star for where Canon's going to be going, but sometimes these prosumer aps-c DSLRs are that for Canon, and so I kind of want to dive into what they should be and why they should be that, and what we should be expecting in order for Canon to continue to be relevant going down the line in this really competitive industry. One of the things that's said of Canon is that what they do really well is compete with themselves, and because they're competing with themselves, they both hurt themselves because the market segmentation really can keep people from knowing which one is right for them. On the other hand, what it does is it means that what they do is always relevant even when it's not competitive. So what we see out of Canon is certain devices always kind of leading the way for the next generation or generation and a half of devices that Canon's going to be making. What we need to see out of the 7D Mark III and the 90D is a number of things. I think first off, got to see dual card slots in anything that's going to be described as a prosumer DSLR. The 7D Mark II has dual card slots. The 80D does not. I think that the 90D needs dual card slots because that's kind of a recurring and increasingly important thing for many photographers and videographers that are shooting Canon. I think the other big thing is 4K. The first time we saw 1080p 60 on a Canon DSLR was on the 7D Mark II, and then the real implementation in a lot of ways was on the 80D, along with that real implementation of DPAF. That made it commercially viable for Canon, and what that meant was that Canon was starting to really dig into what this technology could do for them. Both the 1080p 60, the increase in frame rate, meaning that they're really getting serious about making an effort with their video, as well as the DPAF, which was a very clear indication that Canon was very serious about continuous autofocus in video, which it hadn't seemed like they were before DPAF really kind of started moving. So before DPAF, there was an AFC called dual pixel autofocus, but it was dependent on STM lenses. What modern DPAF means is that it can be used with all of Canon's lenses, including third-party lenses. So that's a very big difference in the two iterations of DPAF, and that's why the 80D is such a big deal. So what we need to be seeing going forward is 4K. 4K on both the 7D Mark III and the 90D. Now, what a lot of people say is, I don't need 4K. Why do I need 4K? I'm a consumer. Why do consumers need 4K? Why if you need 4K, get a cinema camera? And it's not, I don't think any of that is true. I think everybody benefits from 4K. I think everybody benefits from technology moving forward, even if you're not someone who wants to use 4K on a regular basis. Because cameras need to be hybrid cameras. They need to be both stills and video, and that needs to be a feature that every manufacturer is really diving into. That hybrid nature of those cameras needs to be something that everybody's diving into, because what that means is that going forward, their devices are still relevant, so their product lineups are still relevant, so that their prices are still low enough to be accessible by consumers and hobbyists, and basically all of us that aren't making, you know, $300,000 a year or more shooting for Vanity Fair, right, or doing celebrity weddings. What it means is that by putting these pieces of functionality into every camera, every creator and every user of these devices is staying relevant within whatever kind of market space they're trying to be relevant within, even if that's just taking videos of your kids or your cat or whatever. You want that to be future-proof. 480, 720 are not future-proof. 1080, nothing is future-proof. Everything has been seen to be future-proof in the past, but is no longer, right? And so in order for everybody to kind of be on the same page, you need to be upgrading constantly, and you need to be competitive within the broader market. Now, there's a big idea kind of floating around, is a big question really floating around. Is Canon going to introduce 4K first on a mirrorless body or on a DSLR body? In my view, Canon will first implement 4K on an aps-c prosumer DSLR because that's what most people buy. Most people that are buying Canon products are buying aps-c models. Most people in that range are entry level. However, when they're looking up, when they upgrade, when they get a better job, when they're getting more serious about photography, they're not going straight from an SL1 or an SL2 to a 60 or a 5D Mark IV, they're going to a 70 or an 80D. Those devices, those 70, 80, 90Ds of the world, really retain their value for a long time for amateurs and consumers and hobbyists. And so they're also really important devices, though, for professionals who need a second body or a backup or even a third or a fourth body in order to make the images that they need to make. So it's kind of a confluence both up and down, and that's something that Canon works very hard at within their market segmentation to build. So whichever way you're coming, you're going to find a very nice fit with that prosumer aps-c DSLR. Now, when I started this channel, I was like, I don't need 4K, and so I was shooting on my 6D with my 24-105, and I was having a blast doing it. I wasn't doing it very well. Please don't go back and check any of those old videos out because they're awful. But I was so enjoying that process, and you know, the more I felt like I was being creatively limited by my camera, the more I realized that I wish I had 4K, because the creative limitations aren't just with autofocus in video or with a logarithmic picture profile, it's also in the resolution. I never felt like I could get a sharp enough output in order to be proud of the image that I was making, and as a photographer first, the image is a very big, important dealio for me. So the image that I was making was not one that I was proud of, and so I was constantly trying to tell a visual story, and I was never really proud of that output because I didn't feel like I could get it sharp enough, I didn't feel like I could get it in focus well, and so forth and so on. And so 4K on my Alpha 6300 was a big deal for me because I could get it in focus, I could get it really sharp at a high resolution, I could make the image and the video that I wanted to make. And so apart from that like kind of personal story, the other big thing for me was that I wasn't really proud of my output from 4K to 1080 on YouTube. I never felt like it looked good. I never felt like that 1080 looked like it was worth watching. And so once I started exporting 4K, by the way, on YouTube trips kind of a dealio within YouTube's stuff so that the 1080 gets delivered at a higher bit rate. So once I started exporting in 4K, I was much more invested. I was able to show viewers that I was much more invested in the image that they were seeing at whatever resolution they were watching it at than I had been previously. And so that was a really big thing for me to say, hello audience, I care about your viewing pleasure and I want to make this as good for you as possible. Now, I might have messed up with some of the coloring and I might have messed up with some of the other bits, but I think Canon's got to implement 4K, not only for creators like myself, but for people that are shooting video of their kids or of a sporting event or of, you know, their cat, not just to future-proof it, but to give a really high-quality image. What Canon's done is they've segmented the quality of their 1080p. You can't get a good 1080p image unless you're buying a 5D Mark IV, a 1DX Mark II, or a C100. Those are that kind of price range between $3,200 and like $6,000 is the only place that you're going to get a reliably decent 1080p image. Every other 1080p is nowhere near as good by comparison. So the 1080 image that Canon's been giving consumers hasn't been even 1080. It hasn't even been future-proofed enough to be useful. And so 4K is a really big step towards not necessarily future-proofing, but giving consumers a resolution that allows them to continue to enjoy the output they've been making with their kids when they're adults or with their grandkids. And it helps families build stories. It helps individuals create moments or capture moments and tell stories. 4K is not just about, you know, what my audience is, the quality of the video that my audience is watching on YouTube. 4K is not just about, you know, a DP for a music video being able to have flexibility in post. 4K is about allowing everybody to tell better stories and capture moments more effectively. So I think that 4K is a very big deal for the 7D Mark III and the 90D. I think that we're going to see in those two cameras a very big shift for Canon towards competition within the broader market space in order to stay relevant for their consumers that have really bought into Canon as a brand. I think that this is going to be a big shakeup for Canon's internal North Star. I think that we're going to start to see Canon be more competitive with other bits and bobs in the market space. I think that we're going to see Canon mirrorless really standing up against Fuji and Sony and Panasonic even down the line if we can get 4K on these two devices. That's about all I have. I think I've kind of rambled on a bit, so I'm sorry about that, and thank you for sticking around. I really appreciate your time and your attention, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one.